Hey everyone, we are starting our new unit this week for Sunday school. We're going to be in Unit 10, Session 1. And in this week, we're going to be in First Samuel. And we're going to be going through and looking at how Saul was anointed as king and just what happened with Israel at this time and just how they were requesting for a king and kind of what was going on with all of that. Um, so, like I said, we'll be in First Samuel, and our first point for this week for our lesson is Israel is demanding a human king. They're demanding a human king, and so what we need to know is God had delivered Israel from Egypt. He had led them out, and He has delivered them from what they were from Egypt, and so this is meaning that God was ruling over them. God has chosen them as His people. Because of this, He was their king, and that's what the covenant was between them. But the problem with this was Israel was looking at this and seeing the nations around them, how they had a king, and they were getting to the point where they were wanting a human king, where they were requesting a king, and this was going it was going against God and what He had planned for them. And so what we see in this is kind of Israel wanting to be like the rest of the nations around them. And this is a good way to kind of talk about how conforming to the world around us is wrong, and it can be dangerous because we see that they wanted a king, but that was not what God had desired. It was not God's plan. And they were going against it. They really wanted it. And for us, and for our teenagers especially, they can see the way their friends are acting, what the society around us is telling us the way we're supposed to act, and they can really think that's what they want. That's what's good. That's what everyone else is doing. That's what I should be doing. And if it goes against what God has told us to do, it's wrong. And so that's a good way we can tie in. Just as Israel, that nation was looking around at what everyone else had and was a king. That's what they wanted. It was going against God, and therefore it was wrong. But we're going to move on and look at our second point, and we're going to see how God kind of still works in this, even though Israel goes against them. So our second point is Samuel anoints Saul as a king. So Saul anointed Samuel, and we see God changes his heart. Right? So Saul is one of he's like the biggest guy, the guy that you would think that would be a king, right? But when Saul is anointed to be king, he's got a change of heart. His heart is softened, and God's grace is upon him. We see that God is basically allowing them to have a king. He's told them, give these people what they want, and it's a king. And so he anoints Saul, and he's basically giving them this king because this is what they think they need at the time. And God is choosing to allow them to get what they think they need and use Saul to use as a benefit, right? God graciously gives them this king because they are still his people. And God is merciful and God is still loving. And even though they're going against what he has said, he still wants to use a king if he can as good and as a benefit. So God is still gracious among this, and he anoints Saul as the king. And then our third point is God then reveals Saul as a king. And we again see Saul was chosen because of his stature, the way he was built. He was the one that looked most like a king, and it was what the Israelites, that's what they wanted. They wanted somebody that they could look to. They weren't wanting just a king that was like God, where they know it wasn't visible. They wanted a big guy that was, visible, that they could look to and be like, yes, this is our king. And so God picks out Saul because of his stature, because of his appearance. And then again, he transformed his heart, And we see he's hiding when he's to be revealed. And when they get him, he's humble. He is not wanting to be boastful in himself, but he's humble about this. And once again, this is God doing working in him to be what these people needed at the time, to be what this group of people really needs. Even though what they want is going against God, he's still going to use what he can for good. Everything God does is for good. That's what he does in this passage. So the main points we want to get across to is don't conform to those around us. Follow what God has called us to do. But even when we do stray from what God has called us to do, he's still going to use us for good. He still wants to be with us, and he's going to give us what we need. So I just appreciate all that you guys do for us and for teaching our Sunday school classes. And just hope we have a great week this Sunday. Thank you, guys.